I never imagined that my own son would raise his hand against me, let alone in front of 200 guests on the day he was supposed to begin his new life. My name is Margaret, and I was standing there in a ballroom filled with flowers and crystal chandeliers when Logan turned to me with a smile that wasn't a smile at all. He asked for something no mother should ever be asked to give, and when I refused, his palm struck my face so hard that the room fell silent. I can still hear the echo of that slap, louder than the music, louder than the gasp of the crowd. For a split second, I stood frozen, my cheek burning, my pride cut open in front of strangers. My son had just demanded $1 million from me, as if love could be measured in cash, and when I said no, he chose humiliation over gratitude. I remember gripping the edge of the table beside me, willing myself not to collapse under the weight of his betrayal. The pain was not only physical, it was the confirmation of every doubt that had haunted me since my husband's funeral. Every fear that Logan cared more about money than family. Every warning that I had tried to silence because I wanted to believe my son would come back to me. In that moment, with eyes staring at me from every corner of the room, I knew I could no longer pretend. What Logan didn't know, what none of the guests suspected, was that I had prepared for this. He thought he could break me, but he underestimated how much strength a grieving widow can find when she is pushed too far. 30 minutes after that slap, everything would turn upside down, and the truth about him and his bride would explode like a storm in the middle of their perfect wedding. The funeral had ended only days before the world seemed to spin out of control. I remember standing under the gray New England sky, the damp earth clinging to my shoes as they lowered Charles's casket into the ground. The air was sharp, filled with the scent of wet leaves and chrysanthemums, and yet what cut me the most was the empty space beside me. My son, Logan, had refused to come home. He told me over the phone that he was too busy, that traveling across the country for his father's funeral wasn't practical. His voice had been cold, like he was brushing off an obligation he had no intention of fulfilling. As I greeted mourners with trembling hands, I kept searching for him among the black coats and bowed heads, almost convincing myself that he might appear at the last minute. But every time the church door creaked, it was someone else. Never my son. I caught myself whispering apologies to Charles in my heart, as if I had failed him by standing there alone without the family we had raised together. That evening, after everyone had gone, I sat in the living room surrounded by silence. The clock ticked too loudly. The house smelled faintly of Charles's aftershave, and the loneliness pressed down on me like an iron weight. I dialed Logan's number again, hoping for some change of heart, but his answer was short and clipped. "Mom, I told you, I can't drop everything right now. Don't make this harder than it already is." Then he hung up. I remember staring at the phone in my hand, anger and grief battling in my chest. A son should not speak that way to his mother, not when his father had just been laid to rest. I tried to swallow the hurt, telling myself it was just stress, just youth, just distance. But in the quiet of that night, I began to wonder if the distance between us had grown into something much deeper. And then, just when I thought the silence would consume me, an envelope arrived in the mail that would open a door to a storm I could never have imagined. A few mornings later, as I poured myself a cup of coffee in the kitchen, I noticed a cream-colored envelope slip beneath my front door. My first thought was that it might be another condolence card, but when I opened it, the gold lettering glared at me like a cruel joke. "You are cordially invited to the wedding of Logan Matthews and Clara Jensen, my son, my only child, getting married just weeks after burying his father, without so much as a conversation with me." I sat at the table, the invitation trembling in my hands. Clara's name was printed in a flowing script, surrounded by embossed roses. I'd only met her once, briefly, and even then, something in her eyes had left me uneasy, as if she were always calculating. I had pushed those feelings aside because Logan seemed so taken with her, and after losing Charles, I didn't want to add more distance between us. Now, though, I couldn't ignore how callous this felt. That evening, my phone buzzed. It was Logan. For a moment, hope flared in me. Perhaps he had realized how hurtful his absence at the funeral had been, but his first words shattered that fragile hope. "Mom, listen, I need a wedding gift, not just a toaster or some china. Clara and I deserve a fresh start, and I know Dad left you well taken care of. I need you to give us $1 million. I thought I had misheard. Logan, $1 million? Do you hear yourself? My voice cracked as I spoke. He didn't hesitate. You have it. You don't need it. Think of it as your way of honoring Dad. He'd want me to have it. The audacity left me speechless. My husband had worked tirelessly his whole life, saving, planning, building a trust so I wouldn't have to worry in my later years. That money wasn't a prize for bad behavior. It was a lifeline, a promise he'd made to me. I told Logan no. My hands were shaking, but I held firm. There was silence on the other end, then a sharp, bitter laugh. You'll regret this, he said before the line went dead. I set the phone down and felt a chill run through me. Something in his tone told me this wasn't over. The wedding day arrived with an uneasy weight pressing on my chest. I had debated whether to attend at all, but some part of me still clung to the hope that Logan might remember he was my son, not just a man chasing status and money. The hotel ballroom in Boston was dripping with extravagance, white roses spilling from crystal vases, a string quartet filling the air with a melody that seemed far too joyful for the way my heart felt. Guests in glittering gowns and sharp tuxedos clinked glasses and whispered greetings, their eyes flicking toward me as though they sensed the tension beneath the surface. When Logan saw me enter, he smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Clara stood beside him, radiant in lace, her hand hooked through his arm as though she had already claimed her prize. I took my seat near the front, clutching my purse like a shield. I kept telling myself to breathe, to survive the day quietly, but I should have known Logan would never allow that. Halfway through the reception, after the first dances and the champagne toasts, he tapped his glass with a fork. The room hushed, all eyes on him. I want to invite my mother to say a few words, he announced, and maybe share her generous wedding gift with us. His tone was sharp, performative, designed to corner me. A murmur ran through the crowd. I stood slowly, my knees stiff, my palms damp. My voice was steady when I said, I came here to witness your marriage. Logan, not to bankroll it. The smirk on his face evaporated. His eyes darkened. And before I could step back, his hand struck across my cheek. A hot sting spread across my skin, the sound of the slap echoing through the cavernous room. Gasps filled the silence. A fork clattered to the floor. Someone cried out. I touched my cheek, stunned, while my son glared at me as if I were his enemy. In that instant, every whisper, every doubt, every moment of grief hardened into something sharp inside me. I turned without a word and walked out of the ballroom, the murmurs of shocked guests following me into the cold hallway beyond. The hallway outside the ballroom smelled faintly of polished wood and spilled champagne. My cheek still throbbed, the outline of Logan's hand burning like a brand, but I refused to let the sting define me. I pressed a cool palm against my skin, steadying my breath, and pulled my phone from my purse. This was the moment I had dreaded yet prepared for. Weeks earlier, When Logan first demanded that obscene sum of money, I had contacted our family lawyer, Mr. Reynolds. Something in Logan's tone, that sense of entitlement, had warned me that he was planning something reckless. Together, we looked into Clara's past, and what we uncovered chilled me. She was still legally married to a man named Henry. Divorce papers had been filed but never finalized, and as if fate wanted to give me a chance to see more clearly, we also discovered that Logan himself had never signed the final decree ending his short-lived marriage to Sophia. He had hidden it from me, perhaps believing it would never matter. Now it mattered more than ever. I stepped into a quiet corner near the coat check and dialed Henry's number. He answered on the first ring, his voice tight with anticipation. "Is it time?" "Yes," I whispered, glancing over my shoulder at the ballroom doors. "It's happening exactly as we feared." "Then I'll be there in 10 minutes, he said. I ended the call and immediately dialed Sophia. Her voice cracked with nerves, but there was steel underneath. "I've been waiting for this day, Margaret. He doesn't get to erase me. Meet me by the ballroom entrance," I told her. "We'll go in together when the moment is right." As I slipped the phone back into my purse, my heartbeat steadied. Logan thought the slap had broken me. That humiliation would silence me. What he didn't realize was that grief had already forged me into something stronger. I wasn't just a widow anymore. I was a woman ready to defend what Charles and I had built, ready to show my son and his bride that their lies could not stand. I straightened my shoulders, took one last breath, and walked back toward the ballroom, the storm already gathering behind me. When I re-entered the ballroom, the air seemed thicker. The music strained as though even the violin sensed what was about to unfold. Guests still whispered about the slap, their eyes darting toward me as I took my seat. Logan stood near the head table, glass in hand, pretending as if nothing had happened. Clara smiled too brightly at the crowd, her fingers gripping his arm in a way that betrayed the nerves beneath her polished exterior. Moments later, the double doors opened again, and the room shifted. Henry stepped inside, his face pale but determined, holding a folder of papers close to his chest. Right behind him came Sophia, her eyes sharp, her stride quick. A ripple of confusion ran through the guests, heads turning, voices rising in low murmurs. Logan's expression faltered when he saw Sophia. Clara's painted smile cracked the instant her eyes landed on Henry. They knew exactly why those two had come. Henry's voice carried across the ballroom, clear and cutting. "This wedding cannot continue. Clara Jensen is still legally my wife. Our divorce has not been finalized." He lifted the papers in his hand, shaking them slightly for all to see. Before the shock could settle, Sophia spoke, her words like a blade. "And Logan Matthews is still married to me. He never filed the final decree. He has no right to stand here pretending he's free." The crowd erupted. Gasps, shouts, chairs scraping against marble floors. Logan stammered, his face turning red, while Clara tried to pull him toward the exit. But before they could move, 2 uniformed officers entered through the side door. Someone, likely Henry, had already contacted the authorities, armed with the legal documents Mr. Reynolds had prepared. "Stop right there," one of the officers commanded. The room fell into stunned silence again. Logan's voice cracked. "This is a mistake. It's all a misunderstanding." But the papers told another story. I watched as the truth unraveled in front of everyone, their perfect facade collapsing under the weight of reality. The humiliation that had burned me minutes earlier now wrapped around him, and for the first time that evening, I felt no shame, only a grim, steady sense of justice beginning to take shape. The scandal at the wedding didn't end with whispers or humiliation. Within weeks, it turned into a legal battle that dragged me into court alongside my son, Logan, desperate to salvage his pride, filed a claim against me, insisting that my late husband's estate had been meant to provide for him as well. He painted himself as the rightful heir, a victim of my so-called selfishness. Clara had disappeared from sight after the fiasco, but Logan clung to the illusion that he could still force my hand through the courts. I sat in the courtroom, the polished oak benches pressing against my back, my hands folded tightly in my lap. Across the aisle, Logan avoided my gaze. His suit looked a size too big, his face drawn and restless. When the judge called the case to order, my attorney, Mr. Reynolds, rose with the calm certainty of a man who had prepared every page, every line. He presented the trust Charles had established years earlier, a thick document bearing his signature and the notary's seal. The language was unambiguous. Upon Charles's death, the trust would pass directly to me, irrevocable and beyond challenge. Logan's name was nowhere in its provisions. Mr. Reynolds explained how Charles had planned carefully to ensure I would be cared for in my later years, and how Logan, as an adult with his own life, had no legal entitlement to that money. When Logan's attorney attempted to argue intent, that surely a father would want to provide for his only son, the judge leaned forward, her tone firm. Intent is not stronger than what is written. The trust is valid. The beneficiary is clear. The gavel struck, and with that sound, the weight I had carried since Charles's funeral seemed to lift. Logan's claim was denied. I looked at my son then, hoping to see even a flicker of remorse. Instead, I saw only fury, a young man drowning in consequences of his own making. And as we left the courtroom, I realized that sometimes justice does not heal, but it does protect. The fallout from the wedding and the courtroom spread faster than I could have imagined. It was in the newspapers, on social media, whispered about in offices and coffee shops. Logan's name became a punchline, attached to words like bigamy and greed. The firm where he had worked for nearly a decade wasted no time cutting ties. They released a statement about integrity and professional standards, and just like that, he was unemployed. I heard from mutual acquaintances that Clara had packed her things within days of the scandal. Whatever bond they had shared crumbled the moment the cameras turned away and the applause of wealth and status faded. She vanished without forwarding address, leaving Logan to face the wreckage alone. I wish I could say he handled it with humility, but word drifted back to me of drunken outbursts at bars, unpaid bills piling on his apartment door, and old friends quietly distancing themselves. The same man who once believed the world owed him everything was now avoided like a contagion. One afternoon, I walked past a bookstore downtown and caught my reflection in the glass. Behind me, I noticed a newspaper stand carrying a headline about Logan's downfall. It struck me then how public his shame had become, how the humiliation he had tried to pin on me at the wedding had returned to him tenfold. I felt no triumph in that moment, only sorrow. He was still my son, the boy whose hand I once held as he learned to walk, the child Charles had carried on his shoulders through summer fairs. But choices have weight, and Logan's choices had crushed him beneath their gravity. The city moved on quickly, as it always does, but for Logan, the collapse was permanent. He had lost his career, his fiancée, and the respect of nearly everyone he knew. All that remained was the shadow of his own making. The envelope arrived on a rainy Thursday, tucked into my mailbox between bills and grocery flyers. My heart sank when I saw the handwriting. It was Logan's, though shakier than I remembered. For a long time I just stood at the kitchen counter, staring at my name written in his uneven script. Torn between the ache of a mother's love and the memory of his hand across my face, I finally opened it. The first lines were desperate, almost frantic. Mom, I know I hurt you. I know I let Dad down. Everything's falling apart. Clara left. The firm fired me, and my friends won't answer my calls. I don't have anyone else. I need help. Please. I need money to get back on my feet. I swear I'll change. The words blurred as tears filled my eyes. For a moment, I felt the old instinct rising, to step in, to rescue, to give until nothing was left of me. That was the role I had always played, the fixer, the cushion between Logan and the world. I set the letter down and walked into Charles's study, a room I had hardly entered since his passing. His leather chair still held the shape of his shoulders. On the bookshelf sat the thick binder Mr. Reynolds had given me, the trust documents Charles had carefully prepared. I ran my hand across the cover and remembered his voice. Promise me, Margaret, you'll protect yourself. Promise me you won't let anyone, not even Logan, take what we built for your future. I sank into the chair and closed my eyes. The house was so quiet, and for the first time, I let the silence comfort me instead of crush me. My son's plea echoed in my mind, but so did my husband's last words. The battle inside me was fierce. Love demanded I reach out, but dignity warned me that saving him again would only fuel his downfall. When I looked back at the letter, I realized the choice had already been made. I had survived too much to surrender now. I folded Logan's letter and placed it in my desk drawer, my hands trembling but resolute. I knew answering his plea with money would only drag us back into the same cycle, me rescuing, him taking, and both of us sinking deeper into disappointment. For once, I had to choose a different path. The next day I met with Mr. Reynolds in his office. The words spilled out faster than I expected. I want to create a fund, I told him. Something for women like me, mothers who've been drained, widows who feel powerless when their families see them as bank accounts instead of human beings. He listened carefully, then smiled with quiet approval. A foundation in your name, Margaret. It could change lives. As we drafted the first outlines, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. This wasn't about punishing Logan. It was about refusing to let grief and betrayal define the rest of my life. Charles had built our future with care. Now I would carry it forward, not by giving in to Logan's demands, but by protecting others from the same kind of wounds. Weeks later, as I signed the final documents establishing the foundation, I felt Charles's presence beside me, steady and proud. The fund bore my name, but in truth it was built on the life we had shared, the values we had fought to preserve. At night, I sometimes reread Logan's letter, the ink smudged by my tears. I still love him. Nothing could erase that. But love does not mean surrendering my dignity or erasing his responsibility. I chose not to answer him with money, but with silence and with action that would outlast us both. To the world, Logan became a cautionary tale. To me, he remained my son, but one whose choices had carved a canyon between us. I could only hope that someday he might climb out of it on his own. As I closed my journal one evening, I whispered a promise to Charles. I protected what we built, and I protected myself. Yaker, for the first time in a long while, the silence in the house felt like peace, not loneliness, and that was enough.